So I'm going to go through the installation instructions for the tutorial. So this is on a freshly installed macOS system, and probably this more or less also applies to any other Unix or Linux system. I'm going to assume you have the README for the tutorial open with the installation instructions, and we're just going to follow these instructions. So the first thing we're going to do is to install Jupyter via Miniforge, and we're just going to follow this link here and go through the page with the link to the installer, and we're going to download the installer, in this case for macOS, and that should end up in your download folder. So you can just open a terminal, go to your download folder, which should be right in your home directory, and there it is, and we're just going to execute that with the sh command. Just press enter here, go through these queries, and then just let it install and wait until the installation has finished. And at the end here, it's going to ask you whether you want to modify your shell startup files to add the conda command to your path environment variable, which means that you can just type conda in the environment instead of having to use the entire path, which would be, in this case, would be users and then your username /miniforge/bin/conda, which you could always type out full. But if you choose to modify your startup files, then if in a new terminal, you can just type conda. So that's, I would recommend here, unless you know what you're doing, that you type yes here. Or you might choose no if you prefer to do it manually, but I recommend setting it up so that it's on your path and you can just run conda. Okay, so now if we open a new terminal, let's just open that up. Okay, first thing is we see that base in the front of the prompt now, so that's already an indication that our conda has been installed sort of properly. So now we can just type the command to install the prerequisites for the tutorial, which is JupyterLab, and then that Python local env kernel, and also you want to make sure that you have IPyMPL in the correct version. So just type that in, and then press enter, and just let that run through. You type yes here to confirm, and then it will just install all the required conda packages. All right, so we're done here. Let's see what we have to do next. So we should double check that the kernel was indeed installed. So we're going to type the Jupyter kernel spec list, and that's showing the Python local env kernel in addition to the standard kernel. And we should also be able to start JupyterLab, and that will just open a new tab in your browser and load the JupyterLab interface. Okay, so let's close that again for now. Let's get rid of those tabs. Okay, and then let's see what is the next step. Okay, so we installed the conda and JupyterLab. So now we should install Julia if we want to do the tutorial in Julia. Oh, before we still have that JupyterLab server running, so let's get rid of that. Okay, so now we're going to install Julia if we want to use Julia for the tutorial, and we'll just follow this link to the Julia up installer, and you'll see there that for Mac and Linux, they give you a command, so you can just copy that command and then open a new terminal, paste in that command, paste it right there, press enter, and just follow the instructions. Press enter again. It's going to download the most recent version of Julia and install that automatically on your system. So that was it already. That was the installation of Julia. Okay, so let's open a new terminal. And now we should be able to just type Julia to get a Julia REPL. And there it is. Okay, and let's go back to the instructions. So now the next step would be to install the IJulia package, which is the kernel that connects Jupyter to Julia. So we go into the PKG mode in the REPL by just typing the square bracket and then do add Julia, and that will install the IJulia package in all of its prerequisites. So that's just going to take a second to install. Okay, now that's installed. We type backspace to go back to the normal Julia mode, and then type using IJulia to load the package. And then in principle, this should have happened automatically, but just to be sure, we're going to do the install kernel manually to really make sure that we get a Jupyter kernel with the correct settings. So we're just going to type this install kernel command and run that. There we go. Okay, so that's really all we need to do at the system level. So for everything else, we're actually going to need the notebooks. So we go back to the GitLab page, and in that code button, so if you already have Git installed and you're familiar with using Git, you could use these cloning URLs to clone the notebooks, and that would make it easier for you to update that in case you make any changes. But otherwise, you can always go down here to download a zip folder for all the notebooks. And that will just download that straight to your downloads folder. So let's see where that landed. So it's right here in the downloads folder. We can click on that to unzip it. So there's the unzip folder, and we're just going to drag that to the desktop so that we have it available in a nicer location. Okay, so that's now we have the files for the workshop. And the next thing we're going to do is to set up the environment both for Python and for Julia that the notebooks are going to use. So let's open up another terminal. Let's go to the folder where the notebook files are. So that's right here. And then we're going to follow the instructions first for the initialization of the Python project. So we're going to type this conda env create -p.venv -f environment.yml, and that's going to install all the packages into a local subfolder with all the packages that are listed in that environment.yml file. So let's give that a second. And that's that. So now that is everything we need to do to run the Python version of the notebooks. Now for Julia, we also need to do some initialization. So there we just type the command that is written here. So we're going to do Julia --project equals dot, and then -e using PKG instantiate. Or you could do it from inside the REPL as well, and then it would be, go into PKG mode and then just type instantiate. But we're going to do it the way it's written in the README. And this is going to install all the Julia packages that are prerequisites for any of the notebooks in the tutorial. So this could actually take a while. If you didn't have Julia installed before, if this is a fresh system, it's going to download. You can see 430 packages here. So it has to download them, it has to compile them, it has to unpack some binary resources. So it could take maybe 10-15 minutes, depending on how fast your computer is. So go grab a cup of coffee, or maybe do this over your lunch break. And we're just going to jump forward here a little to the end. Okay, and that's everything there is to setting up the environment. So now we have both a Python and a Julia environment installed. That should be sufficient to run all of the notebooks. And well, just one thing we should just double check again, which we kind of forgot about when we were installing the IJulia kernel. Let's just double check that we have all the kernels installed properly. So there's the baseline Python 3, that's the default kernel, and then we have the Python local venv kernel that we're going to use to access all the Python packages, and then the Julia kernel for the Julia packages. And then we can just run Jupyter Lab, and that should open up a new browser tab. Okay, there we are. So now both for Python and for Julia, we have a Hello World notebook that we're just going to go through. That should verify that everything is set up correctly. So yeah, we can just go through this. We're going to run some Python code that works. We're going to load one of the packages that is used in the tutorials. So if that works, that makes it very likely that everything is using the correct environment. Go through all the other packages, go through the visualization. You can test out some of the features of Jupyter, like how to type Unicode symbols, just with LaTeX syntax, and then you press the tab key, or how to access the help system. And that's it for the Python notebooks. Now we have the same thing for Julia. If you want to do any of the Julia tutorial notebooks, there's another Hello World notebook. And again, we can just run through that and make sure first that we can just run some Julia code, that we have the correct versions installed, double check that the environment is set up. So this might take another second or so, because it's going to precompile some extra components. And then we can load one of the packages that's going to be used. And if that works, then we're probably in good shape. We can load the other packages as well. Check out the visualization. And then there's going to be one example where we're going to use some of the Python packages from inside Julia just for visualization. So that's going to be something that we need to set up here. So we're going to set up this environment variable here to point us to the Python from the Python environment that we just set up before. And that should allow us to import some of the Python packages. And we can just try that out here using one of the Qtypes objects. Okay, and beyond that, you can just try out, again, some of the features of Jupyter, like how to type Unicode and how to get help. Just how to display things. And then the rest of this Hello World is just going to be some Julia syntax tips for those of you who are maybe not quite so familiar with Julia yet. So this is just to help you sort of easily read the Julia code in the tutorial if you're already familiar with either MATLAB or Python or Fortran or something similar. So this is just something that you can go through by yourself.